Hello, everybody, and thanks for having us and staying with us until so late into the day for Diffusion. Today we have we have Rick, we have Santiago, and we have Kent, and we're going to talk about how not to get ripped off in DeFi. It's an increasingly important topic, given that the recent hacks in the industry have been quite significant. So in the past 1 year, we had about 7 billion lost, compared to 1.5 billion up from last year. So if you thought like DeFi was going away and there's no usage, well, think twice, because that's not really the case. But first things first, let's introduce our speakers and then we'll dive deep into the topic. So Ken, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hey, Anna, thanks for having us today. I've been looking forward to this chat. It's just like so timely and topical. So yeah, I'm Kent. I've had a fun journey in crypto. Back in the day, I started out the Ethereum community in Denver, which kind of grew into the ETH Denver hackathon. If any of you guys have heard of or been out to that. More recently, I was head of R&D at Shapeshift, centralized Shapeshift, and that was a fun role that in a lot of ways is relevant to what we'll be talking about today. In addition to incubating some cool projects, we also dove into a lot of aspects of crypto and DeFi. This is such a fast moving space, and kind of analyzing the different components of all these money Legos, whether it's like stable coins or cross-chain bridges, everything that's involved in looking at the risks. And then fast forward to today, after a brief hiatus, I'm actually back at Shapeshift, this time the DAO, since Shapeshift is actually decentralized. We're now a DAO, and I lead the tokenomics work stream. So I have to be very mindful of all this stuff in DeFi, really with an eye towards risk management. We're managing the treasury. Currently, it's over like $200 million, and trying to find ways to generate revenue on these things, but in a way that won't blow things up and it manages risk. So this is something that's kind of on my mind 24/7, and yeah, really excited to talk about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for this. Santiago, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, great to be here, everyone. I've been investing in crypto for a while now. Most recently was at Parify, where we were really kind of one of the first vertically focused crypto funds in the space, very focused on DeFi. And now I'm, just invest as an angel. I'm a core contributor in a few communities and DAOs, really focused at this intersection of gaming and DeFi. And so I think these two worlds are interacting and will increasingly kind of converge and collide in very interesting ways. And so, excited to chat about some of these topics and help, answer any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And Rick, tell us.
Hey. Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here as well. It's going to be fun. I've basically been mostly in cybersecurity my whole life. So over 15 years at this point in the cybersecurity industry as a career, starting off as essentially what was a black hat hacker or a gray hat hacker, and then moving over to being the role of like what is now called red team, but penetration testing, working with organizations to secure them by essentially hacking them. And that led me down the path of building a company, started a company in 2013 in the Web2 space called Opposy, focusing on enterprise cybersecurity in various different methods. Also went through Y Combinator during that time, which many people are aware of and know of. And then as of recently, thinking more and more, taking my personal interests and how I want to see the internet and the world evolve, getting more interested in blockchain itself, we decided to take what we're doing and apply it to blockchain and figure out how we can protect individuals and blockchain and build a cool product around that, which is called, that company is called Interlock.
Cool. Thanks for this. And for the audience benefits, you might have seen me before. I'm Anna, and I lead the deal flow team in Outlier. So spend most of my time working with founders, and some of my time working with investors. So quite timely, given that DeFi is like a pretty big topic, especially with like more traditional equity investors. And the question everybody's actually asking me is how do you actually ensure KYC? How do you ensure AML? And my answer is always, well, if you have true DeFi, you don't. But then how we're going to bridge it? Well, once we have the IDs, when the IDs are coming, well, in the next couple of years. So in the meantime, we do need to talk about some solutions, and we do need to, I guess, as a community, improve user security in the space. So it'll be quite interesting actually to understand, like, why are people actually getting ripped off in the first place? Rick, you are a cybersecurity pro, you spend so much time looking into social attacks and all sorts of different angles people can actually get attacked. Like, what's the source of this?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, what it is that it's a whole new world of the internet, and more so, there's a lot of money floating around it. And unfortunately, when there's money floating around or assets of any kind that can be taken, there was always people who are going to try to do that. So realistically, the influx of the amount of currency that's being added to the networks and to the world has caused people to take notice of it and essentially shift their what you might call prior attacks, which may have been focused on Web 2, over to Web 3, just because very little time and money is spent comparatively on Web 3 versus Web 2 to try to secure individuals, to try to secure organizations. So realistically, people have taken advantage of that slight lack, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you have like so much capital in the industry, but it's treasury management. It's in such an infant stage that it's not necessarily spending that much resources towards security. And then most of the security checks in place are like audits of the contracts, but then auditors are like the busiest people in the industry right now. That everybody who's tried to book an audit these days knows like what kind of queues we're battling with. So until we have the infrastructure in place for these things, like Santiago, you're like a very avid user of DeFi. You've invested so much into it. Like, what are the easiest ways like people can lose their funds?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it we've seen, and especially for NFT buyers that are perhaps a little bit less sophisticated. But I think the common ways to lose funds are, you get tricked into thinking that you're going to, for instance, you're in MetaMask and you get tricked into entering your seed phrase. I think over and over again, people just the first rule of thumb in crypto is never, ever, ever share your seed phrase with absolutely anyone, not even your spouse, no one. And that's like sacrosanct. And I think, it's simple things like if it's late at night or early, slow down, right? And I think we're used to like this sort of pace of crypto moves so quickly, but it's so easy. And unfortunately, once you enter your seed phrase, you're done. The other one is just making sure that you always interact with the right contract. Like Badger, for instance, just recently got hacked. And it's just crazy that a lot of these institutions, you just always check the contract that you're interacting with. And if you don't understand it, then at least ping other people, right? There's nothing like going in Discord and saying, hey guys, like just double checking here. Is this the right contract? And very quickly, these communities will steer you in the right direction, right? The other one is Discord. I feel like a lot of people have been scammed in Discord, where you think that it's a core member of the team that's DMing you, and it's rarely the case. And so just you always need to be very vigilant. So it's really these approval of contracts, unlimited approvals that can be problematic, or entering your seed phrase. And so it's always important to just check your approvals of contracts and revoke access to things that, either have unlimited spend or you just don't recognize the contract. It's just sort of healthy wallet maintenance and hygiene. And, security is asymptotic. So you always need to be constantly thinking about, as you have more funds in space or just amounts that are non-trivial, then you constantly need to beef up your security. So I love Harry Potter. It's no surprise. So I think you always need to have the Horcrux model when it comes to crypto, like segregate your, have multiple wallets. If you're going to have a cold wallet that you don't approve any contracts, you're not even using Uniswap or anything really. And then have one wallet that really just acts as your experimental wallet that if you want to go out and test new protocols and everything, it's fine, but treat it as just that, and don't have core holdings there, because you know, you never know, some of these contracts might, you know, could be problematic down the road.
Yeah, I definitely see the allure of keeping everything in one wallet. It's much easier if you load ETH in just one wallet, and then whatever like other currency you have, it's just easier to just keep reusing that same wallet instead of like moving things around. But hygiene is actually quite important. Especially, and also the other point is like logins, right? So it's so much easier to log in with one single wallet instead of trying to find which wallet you actually logged in if you're using MetaMask. So I used to, like, up until a certain point, I actually used to create like different wallets for different apps and all these things. But at some point, it was just, I've noticed like that was slightly going away and everything was starting to merge. And then I had to like get away from that. So
look, I mean, I think just simple tools like Zapper you know, allows you to aggregate all your wallets. And look, when it comes to private security, you don't trade convenience for security ever. That's just a rule of thumb. And you just accept that. And you're dealing with money, and you always need to assume that people, and you know, you have to be highly, highly skeptical. So convenience is not what we're here for. We're here for other things. But convenience at this moment in this evolution of this industry, you're making the trade-off of convenience. And you know, that's the state of the game.
Yeah, one slippery slope I've seen along those lines, Santiago, has been where people will set up a maybe not so secure hardware wallet or software wallet, maybe even like a mobile wallet on their phone or MetaMask, which are, you know, quantifiably much less secure than hardware wallets. And they think, well, you know, I don't have too much crypto in here, it's not a big deal. But then, you know, in a bull market, of course, prices can appreciate so fast. And before you know it, you know, this user is sitting on a substantial sum, but they don't really think to be like, oh, okay, maybe I need to be moving this to a hardware wallet, and that really puts them at risk.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, mobile wallets are so easy to use, right? Like I've said, most of the mobile wallets I've actually set up before just to test them out and to try and play around with mobile experience has been like most of the wallets don't actually lock with Face ID. Like they let you go in and out of the wallet, perform all sorts of transactions without even prompting you to set up a password, prompting you to set up Face ID. It's just like the very basic things of mobile experience, right? They're letting the users go like this, which is actually like, it's kind of on the builders and on the companies, but it's also on the user. So it's like a shared responsibility, which brings us to like, it's quite interesting to learn more about like what's the impact of coordinated attacks on both companies protocols, I guess, and also the users. Like Kent, I think you've got like you've looked into it quite a lot as part of ShapeShift.
Yeah, I guess, you know, you could split it between like a crypto native company or projects like DAOs or DeFi projects and sort of traditional businesses that are using crypto. I think for the traditional cohort, the worst kind of impact is like for companies that are dabbling with this and experimenting with us with DeFi. When something bad happens, they'll suddenly put their hands back and say, okay, we're not going to go there. And there's a huge opportunity cost to missing the boat, so to speak, because there's, you know, in financial terms, there's a lot of gains to be had relative to maybe what you would earn just in the traditional world with like savings accounts. I think there's kind of a misconception that, you know, we have this Wild West and it's just naturally risky. So, you know, of course, and there are monetary losses that can accrue to regular companies. For crypto projects, the stakes are far higher because, you know, many of these, especially DAOs, exist exclusively on the blockchain. This is the case with ShapeShift. So if something goes amiss, the worst case scenario is a project can have all of its funds drained or a substantial portion, and then also the other hit, which is equally bad perhaps, is like, you know, losing credibility because people are trusting crypto projects to be responsible custodians of the treasury, which of course is, you know, user funds and investor funds. When something goes wrong, it really, you know, can impact, you know, just the community's ability to connect with other crypto projects, and you know, you kind of have a very bad day. if any of the viewers want to look at some of the examples of what can happen, there's a site called Rect. That's rect.news. And you'll just see, this is a frequent thing. I think proportional to how much money is in DeFi, it's actually, a relatively small amount, but projects getting hacked happens all the time for many of the reasons we just talked about, or even, there's more targeted attacks now, like malicious installs of MetaMask, actually, getting into the MetaMask programming and, stealing users' funds that way. And there's all sorts of bad things that can happen. So when you forge ahead without an idea of where the risks are and how to manage them and mitigate them, it can be risky. And yeah, worst case scenario, it can certainly just be the end of a crypto-based project.
Yes, yeah, that's very true. I mean, both for like decentralized projects and centralized, like CeFi and DeFi both. It's like we've seen the community turn against like quite significant projects, and we've seen the community like just abandon like CeFi solutions after this as well. Because the reason why we're actually coming into crypto in Web3 is, I guess, as users, we're like sick and tired of having data leaks all the time, and we're moving into this new industry where, as early adopters, we're super like our risk taking is actually quite high, but we're actually faced with like mainstream adoption, and most people are risk averse when it comes to this, but don't really want to take the responsibility for the actions. So it's kind of like how do we balance the user side of it together with like the responsibility of the user, being your own bank, together with like users don't actually necessarily want to take that responsibility, they want to be protected. So it's a super interesting thing. And I think with DAOs, like you merge these in a really weird way. So I think, Santiago, your Power of Pleasure DAO, like how do you think DAOs should be approaching security, given that you don't really have a central budget? You have treasury under management, but you don't necessarily have the executives that are approving the security orders. You don't have the executives doing the security protocols. You don't have a walled garden around your products. Like how can DAOs like protect essentially the community?
Well, no, I mean, I would push back on that a bit. I mean, I think DAOs, at the end of the day, like the decision making around DAOs is very structured and transparent. And so, most of the time you're able to see who's part of the DAO, the things that are being voted on. I mean, I guess not all DAOs are created equal, right? Some DAOs just are not very transparent. They're community-driven projects, but what ends up happening in terms of how you administer funds and all this stuff is not very open. And so it's just important to understand that, most of the DAOs, Pleasure DAO, for instance, it's all very transparent. How we manage our treasury, anytime funds need to be moved around, it's multi-sig. And so, from that perspective, any member of the DAO can see how the funds are being utilized, and it's all very open and transparent. And so, but of course, not all DAOs are like that. And so it's important to understand, who has control of the funds, if it's a multi-sig, and who's in the multi-sig, and are those people trusted, and what kind of rules, either on like formally expressed rules through a contract, smart contract, or just soft rules, which is just sort of embedded in, you're trusting a community, you're trusting certain leaders in the DAO, then obviously could be a little bit more, problematic, if you will. But yeah, it's just there have been a few hacks where, I think it was, I forget which DAO, that apparently one of the members of the multi-sig was managing an EOA, and he had a lot of funds, and before he transferred over to the multi-sig, he was able to like steal all of these funds. And so it's just what is important is, as a community, we need to raise awareness of how these things are being administered, right? And so if you're funding an EOA and there's a lot, and it's meant to be why wouldn't it be a multi-sig? And so, especially when it's a DAO. And so it's just really important as a community to police and make other people aware. I'm always very skeptical when you're funding not a smart contract, like not a multi-sig, if you will. And time again, teams are like, oh, our private keys got compromised. And well, why in the first place are you not using a Gnosis safe? Like there's like best practices in the industry that takes 2 minutes to set up a Gnosis safe. And so it's unacceptable for teams in today's world not to be using a multi-sig. It's a huge red flag. It is borderline, like I would say definitely not professional, but unethical at this point. It's just a huge security risk. And if you're going to raise anything more than 1 ETH or whatever, if you're being entrusted with funds from the community for your project, for a DAO, you need to have a multi-sig. Anything else than that is a huge major red flag.
Yeah, totally agree. That's literally the first thing you do when you first even think of setting up a DAO. Like every time I've looked into setting up with some people, we're all like, put the funds in a multi-sig, don't keep them in your wallet.
Absolutely.
we trust you as a person. We don't trust your security practices. Getting that multi-sig, and let's roll and let's focus on other things. Because that's the thing with DAOs, right? You have to focus on so many different levels, so many different things that until your core team and your core community is big enough to police all these things, like it's like a startup. It's just too busy. But yeah, thanks for this. I think Rick, you've been looking into like securing like DAOs and companies. Like what were you, in your opinion, like some best practices from like cybersecurity standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, Santiago's points are absolutely 100% true. Like at a bare minimum, it's like you have to have multi-sig. I think about it a little differently from the perspective of how I'm viewing it, more like the individuals within a DAO or an organization that is centralized or decentralized, whether they're a DAO completely or not, a company that's aiming to be a DAO. You have to think about the individuals that are stakeholders within the organization, and as well as users of the platform itself from a couple different perspectives. If you're talking about people in a DAO who have control and maybe own one of those signatures, and they're one of the people who are part of the multi-sig, you have to understand what they may be trusted, but what's their own personal level of security as it brings to what steps do they take to stay secure on their device, even outside of just talking about their wallet in particular, because a compromised device can also lead to other different types of compromise, and the right smart hacker can actually figure out ways to get your your seed phrase out of you, even if you're extremely savvy. Obviously, the most savvy people, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen to Santiago or probably anyone on this call, but it still can happen, especially if someone's got a really well-crafted attack or has created an application that goes out of its way to try to mimic something else, or a website that is just really, really, really convincing, or is doing things in the background that can't even be monitored with the naked eye, something that's just happening. So when you're talking about individuals within an organization or as an organization as a whole, you also need to consider the personal security of an individual, how well their endpoints are secured, and then consider that sort of your walled garden. It's not the same sort of walled garden that would be with a centralized organization with an office in a city that has firewalls and various other things that are protecting them as an org, but it is similarly kind of networking itself together in the same sort of decentralized manner, just on individual devices, to come together to create some sort of security that can be verified and trusted beyond just the individual's responsibility to make sure that they're double, triple, quadruple checking what they're doing on top of having multi-sig, on top of having multi-factor authentication. It's security comes in layers, so you have to make sure that you're looking at in security, we call it the security onion. It's a stupid name, but the metaphor makes sense on the layers of the onion and how you essentially secure.
Oh, right. I think we lost you. Like in peeling the onion of security, but that's right. Well, that's really good metaphor, because then pretty much you are opening yourselves to attacks from like hardware all the way up to like the application layer, and then also human level. And yeah, speaking about the human level thing, like last thing we can cover before we wrap up, but Kent, like at the human level, what are some of the, I guess, like designs and behaviors we can form around like helping the junior degens like protect themselves from all sorts of different attacks?
It's really, I think, on creating a culture of awareness and risk management. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do to mitigate the threats of DeFi. You can tap into all these wonderful opportunities and do it in a way that is more, that makes sure that you're not going to, lose everything. Or if you are a project leveraging this technology, employing a lot of the best practices here. But some of the things that I look for are when you're considering leveraging a piece of DeFi, consider the Lindy effect. That's a term that the Bitcoiners have been using for a long time, but it's now become relevant, I think, with Ethereum and with DeFi in general. In general, the longer a project has been live, the less likely it is to maybe fall victim to low-hanging fruit from attackers, to easy attacks. That's not a surefire thing, but in general, a project that's been live 3 or 6 months is generally less risky than a project that just launched, recently and hasn't really had a track record of securing much of users' funds. It's also super important to look at the team. One thing, I actually wrote an article about this. If everybody other wants to Google it, it's called "How to Vet Crypto Projects and Blockchain Tech." But one of the things I look at is like, okay, with the team, do they really know their stuff? Do they have a track record? And one red flag for me is when there's hubris and cockiness with the crypto developers. This is typically, pardon me, the sun's in my eyes. Typically, the thing is, like in crypto, nobody knows it all. Even if you think you know it all, that's all going to be rendered moot in a few months because we move so fast. So I found that when people get overly cocky online on Twitter or just interacting with them, that can kind of be a red flag, and you want to steer clear. Also, you want to look at like audits. Audits, again, are no guarantee that a project will be secure. There's been plenty of DeFi projects that were audited and subsequently hacked, but at least it provides a measure of like, okay, knowing that some of that low-hanging fruit for hackers has hopefully been addressed. And then lastly, you can manage risk with decentralized insurance. My favorite is Nexus Mutual. So if you're leveraging these different building blocks of crypto, go out and get some coverage, or consider getting coverage on Nexus Mutual that way you're covered in the event that a smart contract exploit should happen.
Yeah, I mean, insurance is like super important. I guess it's like it's your last line of defense. If something happens, then that's pretty much it. The only way you're gonna recover anything, unless we've seen this happen actually, like hackers being discovered and being bullied into returning the cash.
Only in crypto, right?
Yeah, only in crypto your community makes you return the cash. But yes, the insurance is pretty much like your last line of defense, we'll say. But yeah, just to summarize, like for any junior DJs out there, like if you're going to be trying new apps, set up new wallets, or keep one burner wallet with a little bit of funds to cover the gas fees, but nothing that will impact your life. And when it comes to just general security, just be mindful of phishing attacks, be mindful of someone trying to get your seed phrase. We've seen some of these things on Twitter as well. People very openly asking about seed phrases in the main threads, but actually I've heard some NFTs were actually stolen that way because some people actually genuinely put the seed phrases in there. So guard these things with your life, and yeah, just make sure you stay solvent, stay liquid, and stay safe out there. Thanks, everybody.